We have more for your ears only. I'm Catherine Herzog.
I'm David Alpern with this quote from the news. Salinger, the author, moved to the woods of New Hampshire partly to escape the intrusions and indignities of American celebrity culture. Salinger, the film, is that culture's revenge. That was New York Times critic A.O. Scott calling a new documentary about the recluse writer a spin circle of hype. Now this.
Well, I just felt like that you didn't have a lot of interest in this film.
I'm one of the few people that try to say to you exactly what they think without meaning to be harmful. I'm not trying to break things down. I'm just trying to maybe temper things a little bit by saying not exactly what people think you want to hear.
Yeah, right.
I find a lot of people tell you exactly what you want to hear.
Yeah, I know that. I don't need that either.
Johnny Cash was feeling hurt. As that clip from a 1972 phone call indicates, his longtime agent and promoter, a Jewish Canadian named Saul Holoff, was dubious about the film Cash was working on with his newfound religiosity, The Gospel Road, A Story of Jesus. It would be one of the issues over which Holoff finally left the employ of a man he'd done so much to make an international music icon, despite a succession of irresponsible concert cancellations, devastating drink and drug addictions.
Holoff outlived Cash before declining health led him to suicide in 2005, but the story of their collaboration and previously unknown facets of Cash's career survived in a trove of letters, audio diaries, and recorded phone calls on which Holoff's son Jonathan has based a new but already prize-winning documentary, My Father and the Man in Black. It made its American debut last week, timed to the 10th anniversary of Cash's death on September 12th. And to talk about the film, his father, and Cash, for your ears only, Jonathan Holoff joins us now. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
You've described your childhood as a blank, seeing your father for only weeks at a time as he was often on tour with Cash. How did you come to discover his archive?
Well, after he committed suicide in 2005, my mother informed me of his death, which led me to ask when would the funeral be. The answer was no. She was simply there wasn't going to be one. She was simply calling to let me know, at which point I kind of crashed and realized that I had spent my entire adult life trying to win my father's approval by bettering him in business. So I packed up my things, I went home, and it was at that point, clearing out my father's things for my mother, that she presented me with this key to a storage locker. It was a treasure trove of material, both about my father's past and about his time with Cash. It was something that took a while for me to embrace. I went twice to this locker without being able to cross the threshold. I didn't want to wade into my father's life. I had left Hollywood and returned to Canada thinking I was escaping my father's shadow, only to find a movie called Walk the Line open 3 months later, at which point our phone started to ring and it wouldn't stop. Journalists wanted to know why my father quit Cash when Cash was on top. That finally prompted me to go see the movie, which I would normally have waited to see all movies on DVD these days. And from there, I just realized for the first time that Cash was famously arrested the year I was born, and I started to wonder if perhaps I'd given my father a tough time in my appraisal of him. And that very night, I went to this storage locker and found not only an amazing amount of memorabilia, but more to the point, 60 hours of audio diaries, confessional, eyewitness, contemporaneous recordings from before I was born, right up until the time my father died, and he also recorded his phone calls with Cash.
How did Cash and your father first meet, and how did your dad begin to reshape and elevate him?
Well, I'm sure Saul would admit it was mostly happenstance, accidental, and good fortune. He ran several rather successful small businesses, including a drive-in restaurant. And at one point, he reasoned that business would improve if he brought singers by to sign autographs. And he quickly discovered that promoting concerts, and indeed he was the first to bring rock and roll to Canada with Bill Haley and his Comets and Chuck Berry and many others. One day, he decided to book a band called Johnny Cash and the Tennessee Two, and the rest is history. In the beginning, my father was 37 and Johnny was 29. My father took over the role of mentor. He was the one who told Johnny that he needed to reach higher. Cash famously was quoted as saying that it was Saul who took him to the next level. He was quite happy getting paid doing what he loved to do, which at that time was mostly playing high school gymnasiums and rodeos and small venues. But my father said, no, we need to look abroad. we need to get you on the biggest stages in the country. And within 1 year, he made good on that pledge, producing the shows at Carnegie Hall and the Hollywood Bowl. But the most interesting discovery I made, and I learned more about my father from his obituary than I ever did in life, was that it was my father who put Johnny and June together professionally.
We've mentioned the addiction, the bad behavior. One factor that helped get Cash back on the straight and narrow was that religious conversion. And talk about that, how that affected his music, his popularity, particularly that Gospel Road movie project.
Initially, Saul's concern was that Johnny's decision to pursue, at this point exclusively, religious-related projects would harm Cash's commercial appeal and indeed threaten his career. Cash had just had his very successful primetime network television series on ABC canceled. Johnny and June became very close with Billy and Ruth Graham, and they decided that they wanted to spread the gospel, and it ultimately turned into this movie shot in Israel.
And how did he regain popularity to become the icon that he is today after A, the bad behavior, and B, the religious turn?
Well, credit goes mostly to American rap/music mogul Rick Rubin. After 20 years of obscurity, more or less, with only one top 10 hit later, he was rediscovered and given a rebirth. You might say that Johnny Cash had 9 lives. A lot of people did, and eventually had the biggest comeback in music industry history.
Director Jonathan Holoff. On September 12th, the 10th anniversary of Johnny Cash's death, his very personal documentary, My Father and the Man in Black, will play at London's prestigious Mayfair Curzon and Soho Curzon cinemas, as well as Manhattan's Quad Cinema, followed there by a Q&A with Jonathan Holoff himself. Now, another parting view of Cash from his singer-daughter, Roseanne.
It was a black Cadillac, drove you away. Everybody's talking, but they don't have much to say.
Next, fostering her favorites, singer-actress Sutton Foster, for your ears only.